Okay, welcome. Today is the disappearance day of Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the Hare Krishna movement. Um, so, in honor of this day, Srila Prabhupada, I wanted to read something from his books. There's an old saying that if you want to know someone, study what their work is. And Srila Prabhupada spent a lot of his time, not all of his time, but he dedicated a majority of his time and energy into writing his books. And to honor Srila Prabhupada is to read his books, because he wrote those books for us, for everybody. So I just wanted to continue reading in the Bhagavatam as we've always been doing, and I just thought it for my own purification, and as well as honoring Srila Prabhupada today. So thanks for listening, if you are listening. So kind of picking up where we left off, I may be repeating a verse or two, but this is from the fourth canto of the Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 11, text number 14. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devam Sarasvatim Vyasam Tato Jayamadhirayat. So, text number 14. This chapter is Swayambhuva Manu advises Dhruva Maharaj. As you remember, Dhruva Maharaj was fighting, and he was killing all the yakshas, and Swayambhuva Manu steps in and says, "Hey, you're taking this way too far." And so he continues to talk to Dhruva Maharaj, I think. One who actually satisfies the Supreme Personality of Godhead during one's lifetime becomes liberated from the gross and subtle material conditions. Thus, being freed from all material modes of nature, he achieves unlimited spiritual bliss. Purport. In the previous verse, it has been explained that one should treat all living entities with tolerance, mercy, friendship, and equality. By such behavior, one satisfies the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and upon his satisfaction, the devotee immediately becomes free from all material conditions. I think we read this last time, but that's okay. The Lord also confirms this in the Bhagavad Gita. Quote, "Anyone who sincerely and seriously engages in my service immediately becomes situated in the transcendental stage, wherein he can enjoy unlimited spiritual bliss." Unquote. Everyone in this material world is struggling hard in order to achieve blissful life. Unfortunately, people do not know how to achieve it. Atheists do not believe in God, and certainly they do not please him. Here it is clearly said that upon pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one immediately attains to the spiritual platform and enjoys unlimited blissful life. To become free from material existence means to become free from the influence of material nature. The word samprasane, which is used in this verse, means, quote, being satisfied, unquote. A person should act in such a way that the Lord is satisfied by the activity. It is not that he himself is to be satisfied. Of course, when the Lord is satisfied, the devotee automatically becomes satisfied. This is the secret of the process of Bhakti Yoga. Outside of Bhakti Yoga, everyone is trying to satisfy himself. No one is trying to satisfy the Lord. Karmis grossly try to satisfy their senses, but even those who are elevated to the platform of knowledge also try to satisfy themselves in a subtle form, like by mental speculation or thinking about yourself as a great philosopher, or putting together great truths and being satisfied that you know truth. Karmis try to satisfy themselves by sense gratification, and jnanis try to satisfy themselves by subtle activities or mental speculation and thinking themselves to be God. The yogis also try to satisfy themselves by thinking that they can achieve different mystic perfections. But only devotees try to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The devotee's process of self-realization is completely different from these processes of the karmis, jnanis, and yogis. Everyone else is trying to satisfy himself, whereas the devotee tries only to satisfy the Lord. The devotional process is completely different from the others. By working to please the Lord by engaging his senses in the Lord's loving service, the devotee is immediately situated on the transcendental platform, and he enjoys unlimited blissful life. Someone might also worship a demigod, but the only reason you worship a demigod is to get some kind of benefit from the demigod, some wealth or some power or some specific material advantage. You can only, for liberation, you can only worship Vishnu, because Vishnu is the only one that can give liberation. But even then, liberation without devotional service is a selfish motivation, because you desire liberation means you desire just simply to get free from all suffering and just be in a state of blissfulness. Where a devotee goes beyond that, a devotee automatically achieves that stage of blissfulness, but their focus remains to satisfy the Supreme Lord. And because one is fully satisfied in that behavior, in other words, one is full of unlimited spiritual bliss, they have no need to look for their own satisfaction. So one can simply go on in an absolutely selfless way and satisfy the Supreme Lord. That's why, unless someone is engaged in pure devotional service, or unless someone is attempting and striving to reach the pure platform of devotional service, they're guaranteed to be engaged in some kind of selfish endeavor. And because of that, their activities at some point will always meet with failure, because we always imperfectly perform our activities. Okay, so text 15. The creation of the material world begins with the 5 elements, and thus everything, including the body of a man or a woman, is created of these elements. By the sexual life of man and woman, the number of men and women in this material world is further increased. Okay, don't know why that's relevant, but I guess we'll find out. Purport: when Swayambhuva Manu saw that Dhruva Maharaj understood the philosophy of Vaishnavism and yet was still dissatisfied because of his brother's death, he gave him an explanation of how this material body is created by the 5 elements of material nature. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is also confirmed, Prakrite Kriyamanani, everything is created, maintained, and annihilated by the material modes of nature. In the background, of course, there is the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Maya Dyakshena. In the 9th chapter, Krishna says, quote, under my superintendence, material nature is acting, unquote. Swayambhuva Manu wanted to impress on Dhruva Maharaj that the death of the material body of his brother was not actually the Yaksha's fault. It was an act of the material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has immense varieties of potencies, and they act in different gross and subtle ways. Yeah, I mean, that's difficult for people to accept, but it's invariably true that as soon as you take a material body, your day of death is set. We may not know it, but it's guaranteed to happen. So for him to be disturbed by the death of the body of his brother is not very enlightened, simply because he has a material body. It's going to happen one way or another. It's simply an act of material nature. So, yeah, that's kind of a really enlightened way of looking at it, I suppose. Continuing, it is by such powerful potencies that the universe is created. Although grossly it appears to be no more than 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Similarly, the bodies of all species of living entities, whether human beings or demigods, animals or birds, are also created by the same 5 elements. And by sexual union they expand into more and more living entities. That is the way of creation, maintenance, and annihilation. One should not be disturbed by the waves of material nature in this process. Dhruva Maharaj was indirectly advised not to be afflicted by the death of his brother, because our relationship with the body is completely material. The real self, spirit soul, is never annihilated or killed by anyone. Same point Krishna makes in Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. So text 16. Manu continued, My dear Dhruva Maharaj, it is simply by the illusory material energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and by the interaction of the three modes of material nature that creation, maintenance, and annihilation takes place. Purport. First, creation takes place with the ingredients of the 5 elements of material nature. Then, by the interaction of the modes of material nature, maintenance also takes place. When a child is born, the parents immediately see to its maintenance. This tendency for maintenance of offspring is present not only in human society, but in animal society as well. Even tigers care for their cubs, although their propensity is to eat other animals. By the interaction of the material modes of nature, creation, maintenance, and also annihilation takes place inevitably. But at the same time, we should know that all this is conducted under the superintendence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything is going on under that process. Creation is the action of the Rajoguna, the mode of passion. Maintenance is the action of Sattva-guna, the mode of goodness. And annihilation is the action of Tamoguna, the mode of ignorance. We can see that those who are situated in the mode of we can see that those who are situated in the mode of goodness live longer than those who are situated in the Tamoguna or Rajoguna. In other words, if one is elevated to the mode of goodness, he is elevated to a higher planetary system, where the duration of life is very great. Urdhvam gacchanti sattvasta. Great rishis, sages, and sannyasis who maintain themselves in Sattva-guna, or the mode of material goodness, are elevated to higher planetary systems. Those who are transcendental even to the material modes of nature are situated in the mode of pure goodness. They attain eternal life in the spiritual world. When Prabhupada said that someone lives longer because they're in the mode of goodness, I was thinking about people that are healthier, people that have a good diet, live a regulated lifestyle, are not in a lot of anxiety, that are very peaceful. Generally, those people have a better lifespan than someone who's constantly anxiety, has a terrible diet, and is constantly fighting with other people or whatever. Like kings are in the mode of passion, so they're always fighting and dying young. And people who are constantly working, laboring, wear their body down very quickly. But someone who's very peaceful and sitting in meditation and living a relatively austere life can live for a very, very long time because they don't wear the body down. But what Prabhupada's actually talking about here is that those in the mode of goodness, they'll be elevated to the heavenly planets where the duration of life is 10,000 times longer than the duration of life is here. Like one day up there is 12,000 years here. And if you go to the lower planets, time goes much, much quicker. A few seconds here is like 900 years down there, something like that. So in both cases, living in the mode of goodness is going to increase your duration of life, and ultimately, if you go to the spiritual world, you'll have practically a permanent living situation. That's how it works, according to the Bhagavatam here. So text 17. Translation. My dear Dhruva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is uncontaminated by the material modes of nature. He is the remote cause of the creation of this material cosmic manifestation. When he gives the impetus, many other causes and effects are produced, and thus the whole universe moves, just as iron moves by the integrated force of a magnet. Purport. How the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead works within this material world is explained in this verse. Everything is happening by the energy of the Supreme Lord. The atheistic philosophers who do not agree to accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the original cause of creation think that the material world moves by the action and reaction of different material elements. A simple example of the interaction of elements occurs when we mix soda and acid, and the movement of effervescence is produced. But one cannot produce life by such interaction of chemicals. There are 8,400,000 different species of life, with different wishes and different actions. How the material force is working cannot be explained just on the basis of chemical reaction. A suitable example in this connection is that of the potter in a potter's wheel. The potter's wheel rotates, and several varieties of earthen pots come out. There are many causes of the earthen pot, but the original cause is the potter, who sets a force on the wheel. That force comes by his superintendence. The same idea is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Behind all material action and reaction there is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna says that everything depends on his energy, and yet he is not everywhere. The pot is produced under certain conditions of action and reaction of material energy, but the potter is not the pot. In a similar way, the material creation is set up by the Lord, but he remains aloof. As stated in the Vedas, he simply glanced over it, and the agitation of matter immediately began. In Bhagavad Gita, it is also said that the Lord impregnates the material energy with the part and parcel jivas, and thus the different forms and different activities immediately ensue. Because of the different desires and karmic activities of the jiva soul, different types of bodies in different species are produced. In Darwin's theory, there is no acceptance of the living entity as spirit soul, and therefore his explanation of evolution is incomplete. Varieties of phenomena occur within this universe on account of the actions and reactions of the three material modes, but the original creator, or the cause, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is mentioned here as Nimitta Matram, the remote cause. He simply pushes the wheel with his energy. According to the Mayavadi philosophers, the Supreme Brahman has transformed himself into many varieties of forms, but that is not the fact. He is always transcendental to the actions and reactions of the material gunas, although he is the cause of all causes. Lord Brahma says, therefore, in the Brahma Samhita 5.1, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. There are many causes and effects, but the original cause is Sri Krishna. Text 18. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his inconceivable supreme energy, time, causes the interaction of the three modes of material nature, and thus varieties of energy become manifest. It appears that he is acting, but he is not the actor. He is killing, but he is not the killer. Thus it is understood that only by his inconceivable power is everything happening. Purport. The word Durvibhavya means inconceivable by our tiny brain, and Vibhakta Viryaha means divided in varieties of potencies. This is the right explanation of the display of creative energies in the material world. We can better understand the mercy of God by an example. A government state is always supposed to be merciful, but sometimes, in order to keep law and order, the government employs its police force, and thus punishment is meted out to the rebellious citizens. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always merciful and full of transcendental qualities, but certain individual souls have forgotten their relationship with Krishna and have endeavored to lord it over material nature. As a result of their endeavor, they are involved in varieties of material interaction. It is incorrect to argue, however, that because energy issues from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is the actor. In the previous verse, the word nimitta matram indicate that the Supreme Lord is completely aloof from the action and reaction of this material world. How is everything being done? The word inconceivable has been used. It is not within the power of one's small brain to comprehend. Unless one accepts the inconceivable power and energy of the Lord, one cannot make any progress. Important point. The forces which act are certainly set up by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he is always aloof from their action and reaction. The varieties of energies produced by the interaction of material nature produce the varieties of species of life and their resultant happiness and unhappiness. How the Lord acts is nicely explained in Vishnu Purana. Fire is situated in one place, while the heat and light produced by the fire act in many different ways. Another example given is that the electric powerhouse is situated in one place, but by its energies many different types of machinery move. The production is never identical with the original source. of the energy. But the original source of energy, being the prime factor, is simultaneously one with and different from the product. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya's philosophy, Achinta Bheda Bheda Tattva, is the perfect way of understanding. In this material world, the Lord incarnates in three forms as Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, by which he takes charge of the three modes of material nature. By his incarnation of Brahma he creates, as the incarnation of Vishnu he maintains, and by his incarnation of Shiva he also annihilates. But the original source of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva is Garbhodakshay Vishnu. Garbhodakshay Vishnu, is always apart from these actions and reactions of material nature. Yes, and the source of Garbhodakshay Vishnu is Karnadakshay Vishnu, and the source of Karnadakshay Vishnu is Sankarshan. Ultimately, it keeps going back, and then there's Krishna. There's many different avatars. There's many different expansions of Krishna before there's actual manifestation of the material world by a form of Vishnu. And that form even remains aloof, who expands himself again to deal more closely with material nature. And ultimately Shiva is the closest the Supreme Lord gets to material nature. And he actually mixes with it. Another good example in this connection is that the government has money, and the government distributes money to different departments, and those different departments then perform their functions. One is a social function, one is a practical, like maintaining the roads, one is for maintaining the food, like food stamps, but the money is the same coming from the government. For the government, it's all just money, but the output, the action of the government looks different according to how you try to take advantage of the services. So the money takes on a different form, just like when the electricity goes into a light bulb, you get light, and when the electricity goes into machinery like a vacuum cleaner, then instead of getting light, you get motion and you get suction from the vacuum. But the electricity is still the same. So it's like that. The energy from Krishna, it's all the same, but based on the product that it produces, it becomes different. And in this way, Krishna is never affected by how the energies are turned out into what they turn out into. It still remains the same from his position. So text number 19. My dear Dhruva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is ever existing, but in the form of time. He is the killer of everything. He has no beginning, although he is the beginning of everything, nor is he ever exhaustible, although everything is exhausted in due course of time. But he is time. So the living entities are created through the agency of the Father and killed through the agency of death, but he is perpetually free from birth and death. Purport. The supreme authority and inconceivable power of the Supreme Personality of Godhead can be minutely studied from this verse. He is always unlimited. That means that he has no creation or end. He is, however, death in the form of time, as described in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, quote, I am death. I take away everything at the end of life. Unquote. Eternal time is also without beginning, but it is the creator of all creatures. The example is given of touchstone, which creates many valuable stones and jewels, but does not decrease in power. Similarly, creation occurs many times. Everything is maintained, and after a time everything is annihilated. But the original creator, the Supreme Lord, remains untouched and undiminished in power. The secondary creation is made by Brahma, but Brahma is created by the Supreme Godhead. Lord Shiva annihilates the whole creation, but at the end he is also annihilated by Vishnu. Lord Vishnu remains. In the Vedic hymns it is stated that in the beginning there is only Vishnu, and that he alone remains at the end. An example can help us to understand the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Lord. In the recent history of warfare, the Supreme Personality of Godhead created a Hitler, and before that, a Napoleon Bonaparte, and they killed many living entities in war. But in the end, Bonaparte and Hitler were also killed. People are still very much interested in writing and reading books about Hitler and Bonaparte and how they killed so many people in war. Yet year after year, many books are published for public reading regarding Hitler's killing thousands of Jews in confinement, but no one is researching who killed Hitler and who created such a gigantic killer of human beings. The devotees of the Lord are not much interested in the study of the flickering history of the world. They are interested only in Him who is the original creator, maintainer, and annihilator. That is the purpose of the Krishna consciousness movement. So why would you be interested in Krishna as the creator of someone like Hitler? Why would Hitler come about? The way Prabhupada's talking, it sounds like, Krishna created him directly. But if you read the purports and the translations that we've been reading, if you're listening, Krishna is he's the remote cause. So he sets up the energy, and it's his energy that's moving it forward, and he's the one pushing the wheel. So in one sense, Krishna creates it, but in another sense, it's not directly him. And I'm saying this, that, in other words, Krishna does not want that the living entities even be in the material world. Krishna doesn't even want that. Krishna wants us to be in the spiritual world with him. But because we choose to come to this material world, there are reactions and there's consequences for that. So by the way of time and by the nature of human interaction and creation and so on and so forth, at some point the situation is just right where the living entities create war for each other, and a great deal of killing is done in the name of nationalism or religion or so many other things. It doesn't mean that Krishna wants this, though it's created within his energy. Kind of like that. It's not that Krishna wants equal people to exist or whatever, but it's simply the way the nature works, and thus Krishna's creating it. That's the way to understand this, I think. And so, as the original creator, what to say? Karma builds up. For example, we read earlier, we'll read it later, I think, that this country, United States, is maintaining many, many slaughterhouses, and also in Canada and Mexico. And those needless killing of living entities is very displeasing to Krishna. And because this material energy is an extension of Krishna, but it's a remote, an impersonal extension, there's no direct involvement with Krishna. There's indirect involvement. So over time, by people doing sinful or things that displease Krishna, there's going to be some kind of reaction. There's going to be a response from material nature. And that Prabhupada describes here that comes in the form of war. That when we kill needlessly living entities, like in slaughterhouses, we're grossly sacrificing others for our own happiness. So it produces a mentality and it produces a nature within that human society that drives it towards war. And then you have to sacrifice your own self or your own family, your own children, in the fire of war, because you've lived a life of gross selfishness. Just for the satisfaction of your own tongue, you're willing to kill and torture millions of living entities every day just to fill your belly. That is an innately demoniac mentality and attitude. And because of that, war actually comes about. And we read this in the beginning that of this section here, where it says, in the previous verse it has been explained that one should treat all living entities with tolerance, mercy, friendship, and equality. So all living entities, how can you, all living entities? I mean, of course we should start with the babies, the unborn babies. We shouldn't be killing them. But, perhaps if we could save the animals, there would be a realization that how valuable human beings can be. Anyway, they both need to be protected, and then human beings, aside from that, need to give up the gross mentality of selfishness, and it can only really be done by taking shelter of Krishna consciousness, because by doing that, like it says in the previous verse, one achieves blissfulness. We were reading that. Prabhupada was saying, being free from material modes of nature, he achieves unlimited blissfulness. So if you're completely free from the modes of material nature, you'll achieve unlimited blissfulness, because you're not being tethered and controlled by anything material. But at the same time, to the degree that you get free from material nature, to that degree you'll experience your own blissfulness as a spirit soul. So it's kind of a win-win situation if people change their paradigm. People change their paradigm from gross selfishness to gradually to selflessness, with Krishna in the picture, selflessness towards Krishna. Then people will become satisfied and blissful, and they won't need so much oil. They won't need so much meat. They won't desire to consume so intensely that they do now. And that will save the human race from, every 10, 20 years having a major war and sacrificing somebody on the altar of warfare. It's an unfortunate situation, but from our philosophy it becomes very clear what the cause is: ignorance and selfishness. So thank you very much for listening. I'm going to stop there. We have a program here in a half an hour. But all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Grant read Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. And hopefully the next time we'll be back, we'll continue our reading from the Bhakti-aloka and continue our study into devotional service, basically. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.